Park is a fundamentally mean-spirited, nasty show that has made American culture not only coarser, but crueler. It's a sentiment that clearly a lot of people seem to believe and agree with. But is it true, though? Created in 1997, South Park is the hit adult animated comedy still airing new episodes to this day on Comedy Central and various streaming platforms. Created by Matt Stone and Trey Parker.
Oh, hi, I'm Trey Parker.
And I'm Matt. Matt Stone, that is.
Oh, you nut.
The series immediately garnered attention for its unique style of animation, and more importantly, its crudeness.
All the bad in society is our fault, blame us.
The show really did push what was allowed on television to its limits for the time. Then, when they made the feature-length film, they naturally pushed the envelope as much as possible for movies, too, with them most of the time focusing on some pretty dark and serious topics that you wouldn't see tackled a whole lot for the time, such as Stan's grandfather wanting Stan to assist him in killing himself, to creating an entire episode dedicated to making jokes about breast cancer, or the episode where Kenny tragically dies in the hospital, and instead of using his acquired stem cells to save his life, Cartman instead uses them to build a pizza restaurant for him. When you look at episodes all let out like that, then it seems like a no-brainer. Yeah, of course that comes off mean-spirited. And I could go on. Britney Spears shooting herself in the head, a little kid dying because Stan couldn't win a hockey game, Cartman threatening Butter so much that he puts him in the hospital, then comes into said hospital to feed him food that he's allergic to. Point is, there's a lot. But did this set out to do that? Did Matt and Trey go into this thinking, alright, this is it, let's see what fucked up thing we can do today?
So, are you guys as anti-Semitic as some might believe?
You know, a lot of people have accused South Park of anti-Semitism, but I'm Jewish and proud of my heritage, and so I can say with some certainty that I am not anti-Semitic.
I am, however.
And beyond that, did they do it unintentionally? Because the argument isn't whether or not they intend for it to be mean-spirited, it's whether or not it is, point blank. Now, I'm not here to argue whether or not South Park has been mean-spirited in the past, because believe me, it has. I think most can agree an episode like Stanley's Cup is heavily bogged down by the fact that it's basically a 22-minute build-up to a kid dying in hospital.
What, you got asthma or something?
No, he has cancer.
What?
But I'm here to discuss whether or not its mean-spiritedness is a part of its identity. Is South Park mean to its core? Well, let's find out. Now, I think it would be best to try and figure out what the point of South Park is. What were Matt and Tress setting out to do when creating the series? And with the show being on the air for around 20 years at this point, it's safe to say whatever point it had initially probably isn't what it is now. I think that's something special about the show. Like, what's the point of The Simpsons? To just be a family sitcom about a middle-class family living in America. That's what it started as back in the 80s, and that's what it's gonna be until the end of time. All computers in the world could blow up tomorrow and they'd still find a way to put something out on Sunday at Fox. But with South Park, because the series has had the same creators and largely the same staff the entire time, it's allowed the show to evolve and grow with them. What's South Park? Well, it's whatever Matt and Trey wanted to be that week. At the beginning it was nothing more than a raunchy adult comedy. Occasionally they'd have a more poignant episode like Big Gay Al's Big Gay Boat Ride. I promise it's not as bad as it sounds.
Now shake. Now, don't be gay. Don't be gay, Spark.
But for the most part, they were just aimed at making you laugh through a series of bizarre concepts, inappropriate swearing, and current pop culture references. But as the series went on, it seems like the two of them started to focus more and more on trying to tackle topical events of the time. Stuff like the Terry Schiavo incident or global warming. You can't really blame them. When you've been working on a show for even 5 years, you're bound to run out of normal ideas to do with the characters, and end up just looking at the news for concepts. The thing I can at the very least appreciate about these kinds of episodes are that they're taking a recent subject and trying to make it their own. Like, they aren't literally commenting on Terry Schiavo. It was Kenny. They simply took the incident from the time to explore the topic of whether or not it was fair to keep someone in a vegetative state for the rest of their life. Or global warming being represented through the fictional man Bear Pig. Like, obviously you can tell what they're doing, but the episode still stands on its own. Hell, I didn't know what global warming was as a kid. But I fucking loved the Man Bear Pig episode, because I didn't need knowledge of it to appreciate the humor. He said cereal instead of super, and that was good enough for 8-year-old me. But you know what episode I didn't enjoy as much when I was younger? 2 Days Before the Day After Tomorrow. Despite finding a lot of the jokes funny, a part of me couldn't fully appreciate it, because younger me was more confused about what they were trying to comment on. These are both episodes tackling global warming, but one replaces it with a comedic fictional stand-in, and therefore stands on its own, and the other is just global warming, point blank. Episodes like these, despite being quite topical for the time, will be able to be rewatched over and over again until the end of time, and won't lose a lot of what made them great in the first place. But what about episodes like the one about Obama being elected president? Obama was the president when I first watched this episode, and I still had no idea what they were talking about. Politics? Fuck, I'd rather be playing Sonic Heroes. Now, even early in its run, the show had dabbled in directly discussing real-world events, such as the Season 5 episode that focused on Bin Laden, and all the stuff surrounding him and how it was affecting the world. Like, when I first saw this episode, the issue they were tackling had long passed, so a majority of it went over my head, like why Stan's mum Sharon was stuck on the couch watching the news in a depressed state, or even the intro.
Remember when life used to be simple and cool? Not really.
But as it went on though, this concept of taking a real-world event and making it your own was sort of lost on the show almost entirely. Sure, they'd do it occasionally, but more recently it appears they've almost completely given up on attempting this, opting to instead just straight up reference the topical thing, like pretty much the entirety of Season 20, which would just take whatever was going on that week with the presidential election and animated it. See, with this, I do sort of need to know what's going on across the water to get a lot of the jokes they're trying to tell. It doesn't stand on its own enough, because it feels like they're repetitively repeating the same jokes and gags over and over again because, well, that's what's going on in the news, instead of using the topic simply as a talking point to try and tell an entertaining story. But strangely enough, it appears as if Matt and Tread don't even care about whatever point they have, and oftentimes are making an episode where they don't even know what their message is until it's done.
And we don't come into a show, we try never to come into a show saying, let's say this, let's make this point. We try to always say, let's tell the story, and then come Monday or Tuesday morning when the show's done, we're like, oh look, that's our point.
And see, that's the thing that always confused me when people brought up South Park trying to make these grandiose stands on certain topics. When they'd criticize episodes, it was never for the quality of the jokes or the characters, but for their opinions or the point they were trying to make. It confused me because I never watched South Park to see Matt and Tread tackle certain issues. I watched it because I simply thought it was funny, and it seems like the creators had a similar mindset when making them, focusing much more on what makes the best story rather than what represents their point the best. So you can give Trey Parker shit for a lot of things if you wanted to, starring in Despicable Me 3 is in my opinion his most questionable move, but the guy fucking knows story structure and how to naturally tell a compelling narrative.
What should happen between every beat that you've written down is either the word therefore or but. And then this happens. No, it should be this happens and therefore this happens. But this happens, therefore this happens.
He's been pretty public about the way he writes South Park, and it's that instead of coming out with an opinion he has on how he can convey that in a story, the story always comes first. I mean, you can literally see their thought process in the documentary 6 Days to Air, which shows you how they come up with their episode ideas. It's always, well, this thing is going on in the news recently, what if this character did this because of it, wouldn't that be funny? And oftentimes what they find would be funny isn't the most politically correct way to tackle these subjects. Why is that? Is it because they're the devil incarnate and want to indoctrinate people into their fucked up way of thinking? Well, as they've said before, it mostly just comes from them finding a lot of humor and doing something fucked up and pissing people off. Even if they don't intentionally go into an episode with that goal in mind, it often veers in that direction because it's the kind of people they are.
But that's the thing is, we don't ever start a season or even start a show sitting down going, what can we do that's really fucked up?
Right.
It's always just saying, oh, this thing is really interesting and it's taking off. And then we end up just taking this big fucked up route because we're fucked up people.
Here's the thing though, I think I've shown well enough that Trey and Matt don't intend to make a show that's mean-spirited, unless they've just consistently been lying for the past 25 years, which believe you me, if they are, they deserve a fucking medal because I've sat through hours and hours and hours of interviews starring these guys from the start of the show until now, and their story has remained pretty much the same. But again, it's not a question of if they do or don't intend on making the series mean-spirited, but if they've ended up doing it unintentionally. When discussing South Park online, I mostly see the same two complaints pop up time and time again. The first being that the show takes really horrible stances on certain issues and gives off a very bad message to its viewers, and second that the show and its creators don't take any stance on issues, and instead chooses to teach the message that nothing matters, and you shouldn't treat any situation seriously. Now, if you have a functioning brain, you can see the obvious contradictions in these statements. And that's that South Park can't simultaneously be devilishly giving a bad message and cowardly standing in the middle, unable to take a side. I understand that not necessarily both sides may agree with the other, but clearly at the very least one of these bold statements must be wrong. So first of all, let's address the side of the argument that states South Park usually stands in the middle of a lot of social issues. Where does this come from? Well, I think this idea usually stems from the fact that oftentimes South Park doesn't pick and choose what they want to make fun of or take a side on, which can sometimes make it unclear what exactly they're trying to say. Not to mention that in interviews, Trey has claimed that they like to stand in the middle and make fun of both sides, but does that necessarily mean that they're saying you're dumb for caring about it? To me at least, it seems like Trey and Matt don't necessarily hate the idea of caring too much about a subject. but instead the way you advocate your opinion to other people, which is where their disdain for celebrity culture comes from. For example, in what I would call one of the worst episodes in the entire series, we have them making a story about the topic of sex changes, with the overall gag here being that Kyle and his dad take it to the extreme by turning black and into a dolphin respectively. It makes just as little sense in the actual episode, I promise.
Look, Ike, your daddy's a dolphin.
Anyways, despite what can be seen as such an obviously anti-sex change episode, the series also spans a scene dedicated to discussing why someone would want to get a sex change, and the positive impact it can have on someone's life.
Sometimes a person's outside doesn't reflect who they are on the inside. They feel like there's somebody trapped in another person's body. They can have a surgery that makes them more into the person they see themselves as.
Or the episode Raising the Bar, which is all about the subject of obesity in America, and how accepted being overweight has become with it being used for entertainment purposes. They spend a lot of the episode poking fun at this concept, but just as much time is spent instead going over how worried the characters are, that these serious issues are merely used to be glorified and mocked by millions of people. Which then results in the thought that maybe they're partially responsible for that.
How did shamelessness get to this? And then I started thinking, maybe it was us. I don't know, but maybe somehow we lowered the bar a long time ago. And now we're all sitting here in the stink of it all.
It's one of the few times in the series where they actually sit down and acknowledge the idea that they might have negatively affected the way people see issues in our society. With examples such as these, you can look at them and go, well, come on, take a side, South Park. You can't make fun of the subject for 22 minutes and throw in a line at the end about how the other side might feel. But for the most part, with a lot of the issues they tackle, you can very easily see the point they're trying to make by just watching the episodes and listening to what the characters have to say. Like, if I were to tell you that South Park has an entire episode where they say the N-word 3 dozen times, you'd probably think it'd be incredibly racist and awful to sit through. But when you actually sit and watch the thing, you'd see that the message to the episode is actually about how hateful words can affect someone, and criticizing those who use them so liberally. It just so happens that Trey and Matt are portraying this message through their own fucked up sense of humor.
If there was a word as kind of hateful as the N-word applies to black people, if there was a word like that against white people would make it illegal.
It seems like from examples like these, that the show doesn't really stand in the middle of these topics, and instead shows both sides of the argument because you need conflict for a story, and that's what they care about most? Before ultimately ending with whatever point that feels ends the story the best. It's not about pushing an agenda, it's about being funny. Like, for as much as the series spends making jokes about, let's say, gay people, for example, there are just as many episodes of the show being incredibly respectful towards gay people.
But if love is love, then it takes form in all shapes and sizes. I guess just because I don't understand it doesn't mean I shouldn't support it.
This isn't them saying they disagree with any of this stuff, they're simply making jokes about anything they want. Whether or not you think they're allowed to do that, that is what they're doing, you have to acknowledge it. Matt and Trav made it fairly clear over the years that for them nothing is off limits, even creating an episode featuring an illustration of the Muslim prophet Muhammad after being threatened of a bombing if they were to do so. They aren't teaching a message that nothing matters. If you want that, then just go watch Rick and Morty.
Nobody exists on purpose. Nobody belongs anywhere. Everybody's gonna die. Come watch TV.
They're instead teaching a message that no matter what situation, there always should be some kind of space where it's allowed to be poked fun at. Whether or not you agree with that mindset is a whole other topic though. Now, I've done a lot of defending South Park, and gave reasons as to why it isn't as evil or bad as people make it out to be, but the show isn't perfect. There are definitely cases in which they mess up. I think a big reason for this has to do with the schedule the show's production runs under, with episodes being fully produced in less than a week. Now, there are many perks to being under such a tight schedule, with one of the main ones being that when you have to get an episode written in such a short amount of time, it means there's less room for you to do rewrites and therefore second guess yourself, and has undoubtedly contributed to some of the best episodes to come out of the show. But when you're making a show in less than a week, sometimes you don't have the time to properly think out whatever point you're trying to make, and it can result in your episode not portraying the point you want it to, or at the very least, it does it in a very bad way. For example, there's an episode in the 23rd season of the show called Bored Girls. It's one of the more controversial episodes they've done in recent times, and it's because they focus their ass story on the topic of whether or not trans people should be allowed to partake in the sports of the gender they transition to. And the thing is, I get what point they're trying to make. Like, I understand what they're saying, they just go about it in a horrible way. The point Matt and Trey are trying to get at here is that whether or not trans people should be allowed to partake, others should also be allowed to have the discussion without being labeled as a transphobe. That's it. It's a very simple point. But the problem is that they're doing this using the most extreme examples of these characters to make that point. Literally just a macho man Randy Savage type who's claiming to be a girl to beat them at the games. It literally took me watching this one 3 times to go, oh, okay. If you ignore all this stuff, there's actually a pretty decent point in here about not every situation being black and white, and that there can be a little more nuance in conversation. But okay, this is buried under the much more talked about aspect of this whole character. Another factor that doesn't really help is that there isn't really a lot of trans representation in media, so when there finally isn't something like this, it can be understandable why people would be upset. I'm not defending this episode at all, by the way. Matt and Trey did it to themselves with this one. But why did they do that? Because they're transphobic? Well, no, there's actually a way more simple answer to this. They thought it'd be funny to take their most PC character and put them with a foil who consistently tries to frame them as being very not PC. At the end of the day, Matt and Trey are making a comedy, and I think at points the side of them that's pulling them towards the comedy can inadvertently cause their point to be completely misinterpreted. In some ways, I think this is very commendable, that they're not aiming to make a show that preaches their viewpoint to the audience. In fact, they've outright stated that just because their episodes can make a point, it doesn't mean that they're entirely saying these are solutions. That's not their job.
But I think we do better when we when we deal with the emotions within it instead of trying to come up with a solution. You know, whatever the nut is of the argument, we put it in 2 characters' mouths and try to find the comedy in that. We used to like try to figure out what it should be in a solution, you know what I mean? And then
Well, I guess we learned our lesson. No, we didn't, dude. No, we didn't.
But at the same time, when you're constantly buying into the belief that your show is some great satire on your culture, then you do kind of have to be careful about the way your episodes can represent you, and how someone might say, this character did this? That must be what Matt and Trey think. Their attention veering more into focusing on political episodes in a lot of their shows certainly hasn't helped. I think I've mentioned it before, but there's a great video by Bernie Vids about that very subject. I definitely do think there's some level of blame to be placed on Matt and Trey for this perception of their show. Like, you can say as many times as you want, we don't want to do politics, we just want to do episodes about the boys, before I'm just sitting here like, well, what's stopping you? Although I will say the most recent season has gotten better about that sort of thing.
Looks like someone forgot what day it was. Haha, bitch!
Do you know what sexual assault is?
But I also think that's a two-way street. Like, I feel like it should be obvious by now, but most of the characters in South Park are, well, characters. They're not puppets. Well, okay, never mind, they are puppets. But they're not always mouthpieces for Trey and Matt to say, okay, this character will say this because it's what we think, and this character will say this because they're a straw man and it's what we don't think. Delightfully devilish, Matt Stone. I instead think they have certain characters say some bad stuff because it's in character for them? Shocking, I know. Like, I don't feel like I need to explain to you that you shouldn't be idolizing Eric Cartman, and I don't think Matt and Trey want you to either. They have an entire episode consisting of Cartman telling jokes about breast cancer. Is this because Trey and Matt are mocking those who suffer from it? No, it's because they thought it'd be funny to do an episode where Cartman's a shithead and ends up paying the price for it. They did the same thing with Scott Tenorman Must Die, they did the same thing with Awesome-O. This one just so happens to be about a much more serious subject. Or how about the aforementioned show where Britney Spears shoots herself in the head? And the episode revolves around how people continue to still exploit her for the sake of money. That sounds pretty bad, but in actuality, the message of it is how obsessive the general public can be with celebrity gossip, feeding off of their failures and not realizing that they too are people. Doesn't sound too mean-spirited to me. I don't know why the stigma of being mean-spirited has been lumped onto South Park so much, yet shows like The Simpsons and Family Guy are somehow exempt from this label with the general public. Family Guy consistently has episodes and characters that I'd argue are 10 times more mean compared to anything South Park has done in its entire run, and with those there's rarely any semblance of well-meaning or care. And despite The Simpsons more often than not being seen as a much more tame show compared to a lot of adult animation these days, at its worst I'd argue again that they've had episodes wildly more mean-spirited than South Park. What about that wonderful moment where Bart stands on his phone while Homer hangs from a tree begging for help? Or where the entire town drives Bart to attempted suicide just for losing a baseball game?
Jump! Who said that?
Why aren't tweets with thousands of likes addressing this type of stuff? I can only imagine it's because South Park more overtly covers these more hot-button issues, and isn't afraid to poke fun at them, making it easier to disagree and get riled up about whatever it is they've said or done. For every example you give me about South Park having an episode that could be deemed mean, I could give you another that instead ends up being quite inspirational or lighthearted or optimistic. Some of my favorites would include such episodes as The List, where after learning that he was voted the ugliest kid in school, Cal goes down a depressive path of ridicule and being ostracized from most of his peers, but by the end realizes that looks don't matter much once you leave school, and you'll instead be judged by your abilities, so that's what you should focus on.
I'm sure Abe Lincoln was right. I don't want to find out I'm good looking and become a total shithead when I grow up. Abe Lincoln?
There's the Mormon episode, in which they spend a majority of it mocking Mormons and how dumb their religion is. But by the end of it, you see the message, which is that whether or not the Mormon faith is based on a lie, it's irrelevant because as long as it teaches a good message and promotes being a good person, then ultimately it's not a bad thing.
I don't care if Joseph Smith made it all up, because what the church teaches now is loving your family, being nice, and helping people. But you're so high and mighty you couldn't look past my religion and just be my friend back. You got a lot of growing up to do, buddy. Suck my balls.
There's the You're Getting Old and Asperger's two-parter, which in fact made me cry as a kid when I first saw it on TV, which features Stan growing distant from everyone around him and starting to become more depressed, before realizing that instead of dwelling in the past, he should instead embrace change with open arms, giving him a brand new outlook on life.
Maybe it won't be like before, but at least it'll all be new. And that's what's gonna make it so that I can keep going. For the first time in a long time, I'm really excited.
They immediately went back on it, but that's besides the point. And without a doubt, my absolute favorite example is Raisins, which shows Stan facing his first breakup and feeling as if nothing in the world matters anymore, before an inspirational speech from Butters, who went through something similar, makes him see that there's a lot in life to enjoy and be happy about, so he may as well focus on the things important to him.
So I have to take the bad with the good. So I guess what I'm feeling is like a beautiful sadness. I guess that sounds stupid.
Yeah, South Park can be mean. But I think I've shown today that the series covers a wide set of emotions, and that the show can't really be tied down or defined by a single trait. Sure, it can be mean, but it can be a whole lot of other things too, just like any person in the world. I don't think South Park says nothing matters. I think it's instead saying that some kind of outlet has to exist that simply shows someone that every now and then, you have to take a step back and see the humor in situations. And I don't think that's a bad thing to do at all.
They think that if you're making fun of something, it means you totally don't care about it, you don't think about it, it doesn't affect you and whatever, and it's like completely the opposite. You know, it's like, it's exactly how we think about things.
I think the main issue that's caused this is that nobody really truly understands what South Park is. Apparently not even its creators. I also think that's kind of a great thing too, that it can be so many different things at any given time. But despite that, I certainly don't think it's fair in my opinion to paint the whole series as being mean-spirited. And I hope maybe I've shown you some of this too. But if not, then oh well. I guess it's just an opinion after all. Like Trey Parker says, it doesn't really matter. Everyone sees their own thing in it. As I said back then, this is one of my favorite cartoons ever. There was like a 5-year period where I would watch reruns of it every single night on Comedy Central. But with the recently released vaccination special I did, I think this would be a great time to look at the topic of current South Park, why I believe the show started going downhill, and why this most recent special shows that they could be getting back on track, to the show once again being amazing. Created by Matt Stone and Trey Parker back in 1997, South Park was an overnight hit, launching both of their careers to then go on and create and star in movies, TV shows, and even Broadway musicals. I mean, Trey even got the prestigious opportunity to voice the villain of the classic film Despicable Me 3. If that doesn't show he's made it, I don't know what does. I love this interview he did at the premiere where it's so obvious he thinks the movie is crap and doesn't want to talk about it.
Now you're here, you're at the premiere, your daughter's here. Is that the most exciting part, or is there something else you're really excited to share with audiences?
No, honestly, this is all, I'm just doing it all through her. I'm just watching her.
But despite all of these endeavors, the duo have always remained as the sole writers and directors for every single episode of South Park for the past near 25 years. Like, that's quite the commitment. But after doing it for so long, you sort of got the feeling at a certain point that they got a bit burnt out in it and were just kind of going through the motions. A while ago, Trey Parker said this quote that was along the lines of, "No matter what you think of current South Park, you know, we made it all, it's still our show." Which is definitely commendable when you consider about how many other shows that have been on for that long lost their creators long ago. Matt Groening, I doubt, is involved in any of the Simpsons stuff anymore besides some executive decisions. And same goes for Seth MacFarlane. I wouldn't be surprised if he ditched Family Guy after the first revival to work on American Dad, then ditched that to go work on the Cleveland show. And again, while that is commendable, it kinda became apparent they were running out of steam a few years back. To me, season 19 was the last truly good season of South Park. That's not to say there's nothing after that I enjoyed. There were still plenty of episodes I've loved since then, such as Put It Down and... So season 20, as I'm sure you most know, was their first attempt at trying to tell one seamless serialized story throughout the 10-episode run, focusing on the topic of internet trolling and nostalgia, with the results being... mixed. I rewatched it the other day, and surprisingly I found myself enjoying it quite a bit, you know, until the moment that put a little wrench in their plans. Of course, being how a large portion of the story focused on the 2016 election, with Matt and Trev fully expecting Hillary Clinton to win. And when she didn't, they realized that they had planned their entire 10-episode plot around this fact, and pretty much had to rewrite everything. By episode 6 or 7 of season 20, it just completely falls apart. They start dropping a lot of plot elements, like the Gentleman's Club, and Mr. Garson realizing what the member berries were doing to everyone in town. The season could just never find its footing again after that. And it's too bad, as to this day it is definitely the most ambitious thing the show tried to pull off, and it just didn't work out. Season 19 showed hints of this more serialized nature, but with 20 they just jumped right into the deep end and told what was basically a 3-hour movie, with a plot that only needed around 1 or 2 episodes, honestly. So would I say that serialization killed South Park? Well, yes. Kinda. But that doesn't mean it could have never worked. I mean, the show has always had serialized stories, such as the season where Kenny died and was replaced with Tweak, and I actually think season 19 struck the perfect balance between episodic adventures with an underlying story about internet ads and PC culture. But the problem with 20 was, obviously, their story relied way too much on forces outside of their control. That's sort of the problem with South Park trying to turn more into this reactionary show that tackles current hot topics and issues. I'd recommend checking out this video by Bernie Vids. It goes into how Matt and Trey never really saw the show as a place where they felt they need to talk about politics all the time, and enjoyed just telling stories with the boys. But the more media outlets and others started telling them what great political commentators they were, the more they sort of bought into that and felt the need to lean into it, like it's what's expected of them. But anyways, after season 20 they definitely realized their mistakes and decided to go back to basics. And by basics, they meant season 19. As each new season has gone back to the mostly episodic stuff with hints of continuity. And is that not more prevalent than with Tegrity Farms? I like Randy as a character, I really do. You could tell Matt and Trey really grew attached to him and wanted to make him more than just Stan's dad. So they started giving him his own centered episodes here and there. And when it happened, you were like, wow, another Randy episode, what a treat, what a nice change of pace. But then they started to really like Randy. Eventually, they just decided to take Randy, make him obsessed with weed, and dump him out in a farm away from all the other characters. And that slowly became the show. It wasn't South Park anymore, it was Tegrity Farms. Like, literally, they changed the intro to focus all about Randy. And while this may have been a funny one-off gag for the premiere, I was surprised to watch the next episode and see that we hadn't gone back to the old intro. Tegrity Farms was here to stay. In the most recent season of South Park, not counting the specials, which I promise I'll talk about soon, I know. Out of the 10 episodes of season 23, guess how many have an A or B story about Randy selling weed? 7. That's like 70% probably. Want to know how many episodes focus on the main 4 boys? 2. And in both cases they're delegated to a side story. Matt and Trey have openly said their favourite episodes of the series are the ones that step away from the real world and just have the boys doing whatever, but like, you have full control of this, there's nothing stopping you from doing that. And it's not like they're simply unaware of what they're doing. Not only is there an episode all about how the townsfolk are sick of Randy and want him out of South Park, quote unquote, but it's almost like they're sticking their finger up to the audience like, yeah, we're only making this for ourselves at this point.
Did everyone enjoy the Halloween special?
No, Randy. Only you did.
Oh, well, that was pretty much my target audience anyway.
At the end of season 22, The Bike Parade, the B story focuses on the boys trying to do something together after realizing that they don't really do anything anymore. And while I guess it's nice they acknowledge it, it's too real, it makes the show depressing to watch. It got so bad that it actively felt like they were fed up with their own show, that they then started taking what people liked about the show and just started getting rid of it. Stuff like removing Mr. Hanky, killing Satan, ignoring the boys almost entirely. It just felt like they hated working on the show, only making it as a yearly requirement. But then that's where the pandemic special came in. With the pandemic, many assumed that a South Park season wouldn't be coming out last year, and well, yes, technically that was true. Instead, they released an hour-long special about the residents of South Park dealing with COVID. And as weird as it is to say, I think the pandemic may have actually given South Park some second wind. A lot of South Park episodes, especially the premieres, feel way too bloated, like they're trying to cram in as much stuff from the past months when they were off the air. But the special just kinda gave them an hour to do whatever they felt like. It was a breath of fresh air for the series. All that being said, I actually think the special was just sort of decent. Again, it focused a lot on Randy, and while it was funny to have the twist that he started the pandemic, coming from something that happened back in season 23, it just feels like the weed stuff has run its course. He wants to capitalize on everything by turning it into weed, I get it, okay? But among that, was this brilliant little B story about the boys, and how they were coping with the pandemic, with Cartman being overjoyed about staying at home, Carol just wanting things to end, Kenny's just a background character like usual. But Stan gets really depressed and misses that social environment, which leads him to project his feelings onto others to act like everything's fine. And this was definitely the highlight of the special. I was a little surprised they didn't immediately jump right into another season after the special. We were just sort of left in the dark about what was going on. Guess we gotta wait until next September for the new season. But that was until around 2 weeks ago, when we got the announcement of a vaccination special coming out. Okay, kinda random, but I'll go with it. I was very worried about this one. The pandemic is such a massive thing, and putting it in the world of South Park just kinda writes itself. But an entire special about the concept of vaccinations? Basically, I was concerned it'd just be a repeat of the previous one. But it came out and I kinda loved it. This special to me feels like what South Park desperately needed. A simple story about the 4 boys. But it didn't even give me just that. It gave me something that I didn't even think I needed with this series. Character drama. I'll talk about that a bit later. For now, let's talk about the plot. This special definitely has a much smaller scale compared to the previous, which I prefer. Mr. Garrison is finally back after being Trump for the past 5 years, and he's acting like the past half a decade never happened. Not realizing why everyone in town hates him, which leads to a ton of hilarious moments.
Oh, I see. Look, everyone, there's a gay man shopping!
This eventually leads into some cult stuff with QAnon, and I'm not even going to comment much on that stuff because I barely know anything about Ireland's politics, never mind America's. All I can say is it didn't bother me as much as other political stuff in South Park, because it not only fit within the story just as a random cult, but it was just really funny anyway with no knowledge about who they are. I love the moment where they show all the Hollywood elitists and there's a picture of Matt and Trey from Basketball, which I unironically think is a really funny movie. But my absolute favorite thing about this special is that it's gotten rid of Randy as the main character. He only really has one line at the very end, and instead it focuses on the main 4 boys who, in my opinion, have their most interesting dynamic ever here, with them fighting all the time and coming to the realization that maybe they aren't even really friends anymore. I don't know why, that's just really cool to me. Sad and depressing, but that's why I like it, it just feels so real.
Okay, thought we had gotten past that, but... Look, let's just face it, you guys. We don't trust each other, and we don't like each other. We can't keep pretending.
To me, South Park was always at its best when it was more character-driven. And is that never more present than in the 2-parter You're Getting Old and Asperger's? Where Stan gets older and becomes more cynical, which pushes away all his friends, to the point where they're happier without him and don't want to be friends anymore. And while at first Stan is against this, by the end he realizes that's just a part of life, and he should take it with his head up and be open to new possibilities and the status quo changing.
But Stan, you have to take down the bad guys and go through a personal transformation so that everything can go back to the way it was!
I don't want everything to go back to the way it was! I don't.
You know, and then they just reset everything within the next 10 seconds. Which of course is really funny, but this vaccination special feels like a fully realized take on that concept from season 15. If there were one thing I would have done different, it's that maybe I wish Kenny wasn't treated as a kid and had some stakes in this. But it's not a big deal because it leads to a lot of really funny moments, and gives them a reason to want to stay together, like trying to organize who gets custody of him.
We need to talk for a second, Kenny. Look, I downloaded Madagascar 3. You want to watch with your troll headphones?
Yeah, okay.
But my absolute favorite thing they did here is what I think started South Park's downfall to begin with. And that's that they didn't reset things by the end. At the end, the 4 boys decide to stop being friends and we see hints at where they could go from here, with Cartman now being friends with Jimmy, Clyde, and some random kid. The main difference is this serialization isn't reactionary. It isn't focused on what's happening in the world, it's focused on the characters and their relationships. There's no outside force that can affect this storyline and how it plays out. It all relies on how Matt and Trey want to handle this. And with the final shots of the special showing a ton of secondary characters from previous episodes, and even bringing back Mr. Hat, while obviously just for nostalgia, I think it represents a change in Matt and Trey's mindset, where that animosity for their past is faded, and they're more willing to now embrace what so many people liked about the series, while still going off in a new direction. For the first time in a long while, I'm really excited to see where South Park goes next season. So yeah, serialization killed South Park, but with the way things seem to be going, it may just be what revives it.
I like hugs and I like cake with the yum yum yum. It's lovin' that I bake. I'm your best friend through and through until the Grim Reaper comes for you.
South Park is an adult animated comedy airing on Comedy Central that focuses on 4 boys, Eric, Kyle, Stan, and Kenny, as we watch their daily activities in the small mountain town South Park. It was very successful, with it finishing its 22nd season back in December. Emphasis on was very successful, because judging by the current ratings of the show, it doesn't seem like it's doing too well ratings-wise. Now this could be down to many things: the show's current focus on more serialized stories compared to the one-offs of earlier seasons, its obsession with politics in each episode basically being, so this week in the news, the fact that the main 4 boys are barely involved in the show anymore and mostly revolves around the adults, or just an overall lack of interest in it, and I wouldn't be surprised if the show were coming close to cancellation. I personally wouldn't really know how to feel about that. A part of me wants the show to continue on endlessly like The Simpsons, providing me with more content of it to watch until the end of time, but another part of me would prefer to see the show not run itself into the ground, with awful episodes I see people complain about on the internet. Like The Simpsons, and end while it's still good. This is somewhat good. But did you know South Park was close to being cancelled far earlier? Like, Season 3 earlier? The creators of the show, Matt Stone and especially Trey Parker, have been very open about their disdain of the first 3 seasons.
So it's ridiculous. That's not funny.
And after watching through them, yeah, I can kinda see why. While I think Season 3 is a massive improvement over the first 2, they're all very rough around the edges, with them heavily relying on fart jokes or just swearing and having the joke be, "Oh look, a little boy swore, isn't that funny?" I wouldn't call them bad, well, bar a few, but they're just not anything special. Matt and Trey thought Season 2 and 3 were so bad that the show wasn't going to be picked up for a 4th season, and also because of their feelings towards them, they wanted to step away from the show and produce something live action, and I mean, they did. But what changed their mind about South Park? Clearly they stuck with the show, and it continued on to be one of the most acclaimed series in all of television. Well, there's one simple answer. That I know of at least. And that's the 1999 theatrical film South Park Bigger, Longer and Uncut. Matt and Trey signed on to make a South Park movie halfway through Season 1, since the network wanted to cash in on the show's current success, fearing that it was just a fad. Matt and Trey also feared this, with it being another reason for them wanting to step away from it pretty early on. I personally wasn't able to experience the South Park movie when it was initially released, because, well, I wasn't born yet. But around 2009 I found the show and immediately fell in love with it. I would watch it every night it was on Comedy Central, collect the merch, and use these old things known as DVDs. Around 2010, my uncle informed me that there was a South Park movie, and I knew I needed to watch it. Since I still didn't know what the internet was, I had to wait until my birthday to get my hands on it, and when the day came I received a DVD of South Park Bigger, Longer and Uncut for my 8th birthday, along with Epic Mickey for the Wii. Kind of a contrast in gifts there. Safe to say the anticipation of opening it before school and then having to wait until I got home to watch it was torture, but when I got home it was the most satisfying thing ever. I absolutely adored this film as a kid. I'd watch it at least once a week and show it to everybody I knew. I thought it was the greatest thing ever conceived by man. But does it still hold up? Fuck yes. I'm not gonna beat around the bush here, folks. There's not gonna be any, but is this movie actually overrated shit. I loved this movie then, and I love this movie now. The movie is about the boys going to see an R-rated movie, Asses of Fire, and they find themselves imitating the words and actions they saw in the film. Once their parents catch wind of what they're saying and doing, they set out to get the show off the air. The plot of this film was ripped right out of an episode from Season 1, Death, with both featuring the parents of South Park, notably Kyle's mum, Sheila Broflovsky. Noticing that the Canadian show that their kids watch, Terrence and Phillip, is filled with crude humour and bad language, and so they set out to get it cancelled.
Terrence and Phillip is a show that the boys in South Park like to watch, and the truth is, they're Canadian. That's why they're so silly.
It seems kind of redundant to have your movie be a rehash of a previous episode, but I think it's able to be miles better and stand apart from the episode by raising the stakes. One thing Matt and Trey didn't want to do when making this film was just have it feel like a regular episode stretched out for an hour and a half, and this succeeded completely in my opinion. It doesn't just stop at the parents going to the network to get the show taken off the air, it leads to a parental organisation being made, which results in Terrence and Phillip being scheduled for execution and an all-out war against America and Canada. They do a really good job at taking a concept that fits right at home with the show's style and making it more theatrical. And all this is wrapped in some great commentary about the show itself, that never feels like it's being shoved in your face. It took me many years of watching it to even see the connection, but then again I was 8, so I don't know how impressive of a feat that is. The commentary is basically that the Terrence and Phillip movie is a representation of South Park the show, and Mothers Against Canada represent all the parents and groups who complained about South Park being nothing but fart jokes, and that they don't want their kids watching it, with the main message behind the movie being parents should take responsibility over their own kids, and not point their bad parenting at a network.
Whenever I get in trouble, you go off and blame everybody else. But I'm the one to blame.
The plot is really well done. I think it mainly succeeds in the audience not needing to know the context or commentary to enjoy it, unlike the current seasons of the show, which heavily rely on you knowing the context behind what they're talking about. Something else this movie excels at, besides everything, is the music. Oh yeah, this movie is a musical, I probably should have mentioned that. Trey Parker is extremely talented at music. Him and Matt even made a Broadway show. So when he pitched to Paramount the idea of it being a musical, they declined.
We finally got Paramount to do a South Park movie, and we're like, we're gonna make it a musical, and they're like, oh no, don't do that.
My only guess for them not wanting to do it would be that it probably would have been hard to see what's being advertised as a hardcore, edgy comedy film also containing Broadway music, but surprisingly it worked really well. I can't name a single song in this entire film that I don't at least somewhat enjoy. And instead of just feeling like a pointless addition, they're all used to further the plot in some way. For example, Blame Canada is used to disguise a montage of mothers against Canada rapidly acquiring a following, or Mountain Town quickly establishing all the characters, before finishing when they arrive at the movie theatre, kicking off the plot. Speaking of Mountain Town, can I just say how brilliant of an opening it is? It's set up in a way to mock how parents wanted the show to be, with it being unusually cheery, and being one of only 2 songs in the film not to contain any cursing, with the other being Up There, a Disney princess song sung by Satan. See, while imitating an act he saw in the movie, Kenny ends up killing himself in Descent to Hell, where he meets Satan and his partner, Saddam Hussein, who plot their return to Earth once Terrence and Philip are killed. This is hands down my favourite depiction of Satan in any form of media. He's first presented as this huge, intimidating threat, but is immediately brought down, and throughout the movie has to switch between a threatening villain and disgruntled spouse. I love it.
Who's my cream puff?
I am.
That's right, buddy.
Not to mention his song is objectively the best in the film, no contest. Also, I'd like to mention that once he was captured, this movie was played to Saddam Hussein, and he enjoyed it. You know you've done something right when this man loves it. It's kind of funny. When I was younger, I fixated a lot more in the songs that involved a lot of vulgar language, like Kyle's mom's a bitch. But now that I'm older, it's given me the opportunity to appreciate the other great aspects of the movie. Like, half these jokes completely flew over my head as a kid, so back then my enjoyment came almost exclusively from the swearing. But now going back to revisit it, I can still say that this movie is really funny. An issue that I and many others have at the newer seasons of South Park is how the jokes and references become dated very quickly. With the show's nature of commentating on recent events, it makes going back to those episodes very hard, because you have to put yourself back in the mindset of the time it was released. But thankfully this isn't really an issue with the film. The only time I can think of a joke now being dated is when the General brought Bill Gates in to complain about Windows 98. And the countless celebrity references. But even then, I can look past them, because of how funny the rest of the movie is. They're constantly hitting you with joke after joke. Even in the serious action scenes, they're able to make me laugh without it interrupting the tone. And there are a lot of fun background gags, such as the MPAA approved version of Asses of Fire being a minute long, and the book Satan is reading. A lot of care was put into the animation, although that doesn't stop it from looking pretty dated. This isn't really a complaint since it was kind of inevitable. The movie's visuals were incredible compared to the first 3 seasons, but like most film adaptations of animated shows, it looks a lot worse when you see how the show looks now. Again, not really a complaint. And I can appreciate them still trying to make it look like it was made with actual construction paper, by giving characters subtle drop shadows, although sometimes they can go a little overboard with it. I can also appreciate how they try to be a lot more cinematic. The scene of Canada bombing the Baldwins first comes to mind, but especially during the musical numbers there are a lot of impressive shots. Now, it's not a perfect movie. It does have a few flaws, like Kyle for some reason knowing how to hack. Although a part of me likes to feel like that was intentional, with Kyle silently looking at Eric and Stan as he does it. And I noticed a few animation errors, but I can forgive these because I'm biased towards South Park. It did really well, getting amazing reviews, and raking in around $80 million on a $20 million budget, with it being the highest grossing R-rated movie of all time. Until it was passed by Sausage Party in 2016. And I can only guess the movie's success convinced Matt and Trey to give the show another shot, and it was definitely a good decision. Watching it along with the early seasons again was so strange after watching the newer seasons. They really feel like completely different shows. When it started, the episodes never really focused on current topics, and I can only guess that their reasoning for now focusing on this is because they've run out of ideas. So when they come in to write an episode with a 6-day time limit, all they have as material is what's going on in the news. And while I do still enjoy the current seasons to a certain extent, it's very impressive that they were able to go around 19 seasons without that much of a dip in quality. Although someday I do hope that they'll return to form and step away from politics. I know Matt and Trey have showed interest in making another film. The Imagination Land trilogy was initially supposed to be just that, but they felt like it didn't warrant being one. And again, with the show's current success, or lack thereof, I don't think it's going to continue for much longer, so hopefully by the time the series ends, Matt and Trey will have another film idea, so they can really end the series on a high note.
Anyone else think that South Park is kind of a mess right now? I mean, not only are fans having to deal with this bizarre as hell scheduling where we only get 6 episodes a year, but also 2 movies, special events, drop at random points every year, which has resulted in South Park getting sued by Warner Brothers, who currently owns the rights to stream the episodes on their streaming service HBO Max. Because apparently Matt and Trey were using some loophole trickery to get around making content for them to divert new South Park stuff to Paramount Plus because it's owned by Viacom, who also owns Comedy Central, who airs South Park. Aren't the streaming wars fun, kids? First of all, how did this happen? How did we get here? Well, let me give you a quick rundown of how this disaster unfolded. So back in 2019, Warner Bros. Landed the exclusive streaming rights to South Park, paying a lofty $500 million for its library of 23 seasons at the time, with the promise of 3 more seasons to come, where the episodes will be available to watch after premiering on television. Just think about how much money that is for a second. $500 million. Just to stream one show for 6 years. That's right, in 2025 the rights would go straight back to Paramount. But given how much HBO used South Park in its advertising, and how it's always on the trending searches, it was a worthy investment in the long run. I mean, if folks want to watch South Park online, they now have to go to your streaming platform. Or do they? See, for Viacom, this was a very smart move. HBO Max was a big hit, and so having one of their most popular cartoons on there is great for advertising, allowing for people who may not have even seen South Park before to finally check it out and become a fan. And then, I don't know, go into South Park Studios and buy a t-shirt. Ugh, well maybe not a t-shirt. There was only one issue that threw a wrench into this $500 million plan, and its name was corporate greed. Because HBO Max was such a success, everyone wanted to try their hand at rivaling Netflix, including Viacom, who launched Paramount Plus, the top streaming service to go to if you want to watch crappy reality shows and movies from 100 years ago nobody remembers. Well, they just gave away one of their biggest properties for the next half a decade. Whatever shall they do? They'll find a loophole, that's what. And so in late 2021, it was announced that Paramount had made a deal with Matt Stone and Trey Parker to create 14 new South Park movies, 2 a year until 2027, as well as renewing it until season 30. It's a lot of South Park. Or is it? Also, by the way, Matt and Trey would receive another $900 million from Paramount for this. Gee, I wonder why they took it. See, coincidentally, right around the time that South Park began releasing these 45-minute movies on Paramount, the regular seasons on HBO Max were decreased from 10 episodes to 6. Huh. Wait a minute, let's do the math. So you have 10, then minus 6, leaves us with 4 episodes unaccounted for. Then, if you take the special event, which is 45 minutes long, and split it in half, you're left with 22 minutes, which is the length of your average South Park episode. Meaning one movie is the equivalent of 2 regular episodes, and we get 2 of those per year. Which means...
Oh my god.
Yeah, so, to anyone with half a brain, the reasoning for this was pretty apparent. Viacom realized how much they screwed up by giving away such a large IP to a rival streaming service, and so in response find a loophole. That HBO Max are entitled to new episodes, but we never said nothing about no movies. Wait, we did? Well, we didn't say nothing about no, special events. Yes, this is apparently why they're being called that. It's comical, honestly. It's like a dumb plot they would make up for the show themselves. Which, you know, they later did do, but this is all fine and dandy, but in this attempt to swoop up the show for their own service, they really hindered a lot of people who were simply just trying to keep up with it regularly. Like, if we ignore all the reasons surrounding it, to your average South Park fan, this was so confusing to work around. To them, all they knew was sometimes it would release on HBO, and sometimes it would release on Paramount. What didn't help is they tried their hands at 45-minute specials a few years back with the COVID and vaccination specials. And because those were made before Paramount Plus, they're still on HBO. So if you were just some Joe Schmo, you couldn't tell where you had to go to get new South Park content. There's also the issue that South Park seasons have been getting shorter and shorter over the years. At the beginning of its run, it was a little inconsistent. Like, season 1 had 13 episodes, 2 had 18, then 3 and 4 had 17, then 14, then 17 again, then 15. But once season 8 rolled around, things had finally gotten into a solid formula. Each season of South Park would contain 14 episodes that would be spread out to the start of the year and the end of the year. For example, in March they'd air the first 7 every week, then they'd take a break for a couple months, then come back around October for the final 7. With them writing, directing, and producing every single episode the week it was airing, this allowed them to not burn themselves out, and come back with recharged batteries and, hopefully, more episode ideas. This was then further shortened by season 16 down to 10 episodes, that would air concurrently within 10 weeks. And now because of this whole Streaming Wars fiasco, it just blew up from there. So like, do we consider the specials as a part of the full seasons, or what?
Like, because now when we're looking through its history, there's that strange point where season 24 only had 2 episodes in it, both of which were the COVID specials. Then there's now a random interjection of 2 more specials which are technically sequels to the previous 2, yet that for some reason air on a completely different streaming service than the first. Then we interrupt that with a pitifully short 6-episode season, then we get another 2 specials from Paramount, and then back to another 6-episode season. And for now, that seems to be the way we'll be having it. Confused? Don't worry, you're not the only one. South Park fans were, understandably, very pissed about needing to pay for 2 streaming services, just to watch new content for the show they liked, with replies to new episode announcements being flooded with folks upset about the way this is being handled, and especially with how poorly it's been communicated to everyone. As far as I'm aware, there was never any attempt to clue fans into what would separate the show from the specials, which definitely would have helped with the confusion. But we may not even stick with that formula for too long, because now the South Park creators have been sued for this very obvious scam they've been pulling on Warner Brothers. Yep. Last week it was announced that Warner Brothers Discovery filed a lawsuit, claiming that South Park breached their exclusivity contract with HBO by airing new stuff on Paramount+. And there's merit to this. If what they're saying is true, then it seems like South Park had promised them 3 10-episode seasons to put on HBO Max. And right now I've only delivered on 14 of the 30 episodes expected at this point. With them claiming that Paramount and South Park planned to divert those extra 4 episodes a season to Paramount+, combining them to create 2 special events. And that is what they did. I'm sorry, I believe that's what they did. See, now I can't get sued. But at the same time, depending on what the specifics of the contract is, Matt and Trey might get away with this. Although I will say, I am not a lawyer or legal person. Shocker, I know I talk about cartoons for a living. All I got is a cool freaking podcast that you should definitely check out after this video. I'm going to be interviewing the creator of Among Us soon, so go subscribe. But it seems like Matt, Trey, and Paramount were able to work around this because of semantics. You know, we promised you episodes. These are special events. Just trying whatever shitty yet hilarious method possible to make content for their own shit. But then Warner chimes in saying that the contract specified Paramount had to offer HBO Max any long-form content before putting it on their own service. Then Paramount says they never specified they'd deliver 30 episodes. And now they're claiming that Warner Brothers have failed to pay all of the $500 million they initially started this with. Despite the deal having gone over 4 years ago, you can see how muddied this all gets. At this rate, it's a bunch of he said, she said, and with conflicting statements and malpractice going on from both parties, I wouldn't be shocked if this ends up getting solved in private in some form, stone and glass houses and all. I can see this going one of a couple ways. 1. Everything continues to go on like normal. Legal shenanigans take a long time to sort out, and Warner Brothers definitely does not have free time on their hands right now, with all the controversy they find themselves in at the minute. So I could picture them taking so long to get through this, that 2025 comes around and their contract is already finished. In which they can go from there, but they're probably not going to get much out of it. What are they going to do? Take their $500 million back and put it into a movie that they'll cancel before it even comes out? Who cares at that point? Paramount and South Park can just continue on as normal. 2. Paramount wins. Paramount undoubtedly did some uncool stuff here. I think most would agree this was not a bro move on Matt and Trey's part either, but illegal? Who knows? So if Paramount wins, then whoop-de-doo. 2025 is right around the corner and they can just put all South Park on one streaming platform again. 3. Warner Brothers wins. I don't know what could happen if that were the result, but either Viacom or South Park would fork over a shit ton of money, or perhaps Matt and Trey would step in like, oh no, Mr. Warner Brothers, we were actually working on those other 16 episodes the whole time. Let us just get those for you. In which case, they'd probably shit out a batch of 16 mediocre episodes just to have it over and done with. In any case, South Park fans win. Very soon it'll be off HBO Max entirely, especially considering I don't even think there's gonna be a HBO Max pretty soon, them combining with Discovery Plus to make a brand new streaming service which you can pay $4,000 a month for, yippee. Throughout this whole ordeal, Matt and Trey have been pretty silent on the matter, but I find it funny all this junk has just not come to light, considering the duo used their previous year's Paramount Plus specials to basically admit to everything unfolding today. Cleverly titled The Streaming Wars, Stan and Tolkien agree to take part in the neighbor's new streaming service, where they make content and put it on the stream every day for money. Then Stan's dad gets upset to find out they're doing this for his rival, and because they're
family, they should do it for him too. And so they agree. And when confronted, all they can say is they did it for the money without realizing how much content they'd actually have to be making.
So if you make an exclusive deal with a streaming service, you can't make an exclusive deal with another streaming service, can you?
It's not our fault that the streaming wars happened.
They've got you money now and way more going on than South Park at the minute. They're opening up a restaurant, investing in an AI deepfake company. They're trying to make the weed store Randy runs in the show IRL. That's not to mention helping make a 3D South Park video game. They've got their plates full and have basically reached the top. So to them, making new South Park or being sued by HBO Max is probably not that big of a deal. Because if it was, I can imagine they would have been a lot more cautious before signing all these contracts. Where is South Park? As of today, the last South Park episode to air was on March 29th, 2023, which just so happened to be my birthday. Little balloons and streamers coming down like the Five Nights at Freddy's. That was not a birthday noise. And while for any other show this would be the norm, generally airing one season and then taking a break for the rest of the year, South Park for the past couple seasons has been working under a new approach. At the start of the year, we get a short 6-episode season, and then towards the end of the year, we get 2 45-minute specials to make up for the missing 4. That way, we get a consistent feed of South Park content throughout the year, and also the creators Matt and Trey get to appease their contracts with both HBO Max and Paramount Plus. Well, maybe appease isn't the right word. But as of now, we're approaching the last quarter of the year, yet there's been no news on when more South Park is coming. Which is especially strange considering in 2022, both of the specials aired in June and July, summertime. In 2021, the COVID specials did release in November and December, however, that was all we got that year. No season at the beginning, so I don't really count that. That leaves Matt and Trey with only 4 months to release an hour and a half worth of South Park specials, which generally would be doable within their usual time frame of making one episode in only 6 days. But I fear that right now, with just how much stuff they've got going on at the minute with South Park, their new video game, their new restaurant, the new weed company we still know nothing about, that the duo may be stretching themselves too thin, and if a lack of South Park this year is going to be the result of that. Making a 22-minute episode in 6 days is one thing, but despite only being double the length, there's so much more to consider with the release of these specials that I think increases the workload tenfold. You know, at least when a season is running and an episode airs that isn't the best, you can at least think, oh well, hopefully the next one is better, I only have to wait another week. You get 10 weeks of that and hopefully by the end you have at least a few bangers in there. Whereas these 2 yearly specials have cut our regular South Park season almost in half. So a lot more is riding on them being worthy substitutions. And with the pattern so far being the specials acting as part 1s and part 2s, directly following up with each other, a lot more planning needs to go into their stories to justify all the time being spent on them over a regular 22-minute episode. So today I wanted to talk about everything going on surrounding South Park at the minute, more specifically with Matt and Trey, to give you an idea of just how much stuff they've got going on right now and how I worry South Park is gonna suffer from all that. You know, unless they decide to announce their new special like the day after I upload this, that sure would be nice. The main thing that's been on my mind as of recent regarding the entirety of South Park has been, are Matt and Trey not incredibly burnt out? If you watch recent interviews with the guys, it becomes evident that they've got their plates full. In 2021, it was confirmed that they had purchased the restaurant Casa Bonita for $3 million, which has been followed up with an extra $40 million in renovations for its open, which we're just now starting to see. With Casa Bonita being such an iconic locale in the South Park universe after the two immortalized it for eternity, they weren't hiding the fact that this was basically just one big fantasy they're playing out. Like, imagine getting to the point where you're so rich that you can just go and buy one of your favorite spots to go to as a kid. Someday maybe I'll acquire you top-rated Irish cuisine for our tux. But I'm sure for them, reliving that moment of childlike wonder lasted for about 4 seconds before they realized, oh, okay, we actually have to run this now. With them claiming it would have saved more time and money to just tear the place to the ground and build a new one, with them opting to renovate it to keep the magic. It's no secret that because every plot in South Park is come up with by Matt and Trey, with the latter being the sole person writing the final draft, they end up inserting a lot of their personal feelings at the time into an episode. So color nobody shocked when they dedicated an entire episode of this year's season to Eric and Kenny opening up a restaurant with the idea of how cool and fun it'll be, only to completely buckle under the realization of how hard it is to actually get a restaurant up and running.
Butters, we're about to reopen a historic landmark that means something to people. You think I'm just doing all this for the fun of it? Hang on a second.
And this is only half the battle. As of now, the only way to get into the place is during beta testing through their mailing list, meaning it's completely up to chance. But once it's finally open to the public, now Matt and Trey have an entirely new challenge: keeping people's attention. Casa Bonita went bankrupt for a reason, and it's because interest was low. The place was apparently a rundown shithole, so they have their work cut out for them in repairing its image and convincing families to go there regularly to keep the profits up. It's not like South Park where they can pick it up, make their episodes for a season, and then fuck off the rest of the year. It's not even like their Broadway show Book of Mormon, where they came in, wrote it, and then openly said they've taken a step back, allowing it to slowly drift away from its original incarnation, with others taking over and tweaking things. It's a living, breathing thing that needs to be attended to regularly, with innovations and consistent customer service. You know, no pressure. Who knows if Casa Bonita will be a success or not, but I'm gonna go there anyway when it opens. I have confidence all this money they're pouring into it will pay off. What I am a little skeptical about, however, is their new video game, the highly anticipated South Park Snow Day. That is, highly anticipated until the trailer was actually shown. Nothing will ever compare to the unbridled excitement I had waiting for the release of South Park. The Stick of Truth. I was 12 years old at the time in my first year of high school and probably at the height of my South Park fandom. I was collecting the old plushies, I would rewatch the movie on DVD constantly, and just wanted to consume as much of the franchise as humanly possible. And with that, it led me wanting something. A good South Park game to play. I got the original PlayStation shooter for my birthday one year, along with Sonic 06, happy birthday me, but I could not comprehend that thing. I could not get past level 2. So as soon as the Stick of Truth was announced, I was immediately on board. I don't care how many delays I gotta wait through. Well, wait, okay, I didn't mean it. And boy was I lucky to have it released the same month as my birthday. Means I gotta wait a whole 4 weeks before I could play it. Wowee. I adored that game. I had hundreds of hours in it, which is really surprising considering how relatively short it is for an RPG. But I would replay it constantly, running through the campaign over and over again as all the different classes. Loved it so much that it was even one of the first Let's Plays I'd ever uploaded to this channel. This is where I'd show it, but I think I got so embarrassed by them that I wiped them off the face of the earth, so enjoy this review of its sequel, The Fractured Butthole, instead.
Me and my friend were talking during class one day about what a sequel to the game would be like, and we both agreed that if the game were to ever get a sequel, it should be about superheroes.
Alright, it's enough of that. Speaking of the sequel, also really enjoyed that one too. Wasn't a fan of all the changes, I think it lost a bit of its simplicity and it drags out a ton by the end. But for what it was, I saw it as nothing more but a worthy follow-up. You could just tell that Matt Stone and Trey Parker put so much work into these projects, making sure they were as amazing as they came out to ensure the franchise's gaming history could work itself out of the shovelware bins. And so with that, the question on everyone's mind was, what's next? Ninjas, Imagination Land, something entirely new? I can't wait. It feels like it's been forever since the last South Park game. Then we heard it was going to be 3D. Alright, seems like they made a big deal during the Stick of Truth's promotional speeches that a game replicating the show's unique art style would be the way to go moving forward, but okay.
We thought that they were finally capable of doing a game that looked just like the show. That was sort of the thing that excited us, is you could sit there and play the game and be walking around the classroom or walking around Cartman's backyard, and if someone was to walk in the room and watch you play the game, they would think you're watching an episode of South Park.
Whatever though, maybe they just want to tackle a gameplay style that wouldn't be possible in merely 2 dimensions. I'm sure that isn't an indicator of the quality here. I'm positive they're approaching this with the same level of love and care that they pride themselves on.
I hope we don't get a fucking 4 on GameSpot, that's what I hope. That'll piss me off.
Well, you didn't get a 4. It was apparent from the very first trailer that South Park Snow Day would be a budget title. It was no surprise to see them advertise the fact that it was $30 so heavily, because if it were a full $60, I think there would be riots on the street because this shit isn't worth it. I was cautiously optimistic for Snow Day, admittedly. Not because I saw any glimmer of hope in what they showed off, but instead because I didn't care that much. Seemed to be an open-ish world hack and slash. The visuals looked uninteresting, and they never really did much to convey to potential players why they needed to get this game, what made it stand apart from others, and ultimately, why it was a worthy successor to the Stick of Truth and Fractured Butthole, why it was worth changing genres. I will say, however, the biggest thing that got me worried about Snow Day was the lack of enthusiasm on Matt and Trey's part. For the other games, despite feeling as if they each took forever to come out, you could always count on the creators being there to talk about it, where they made it evident that they were giving these things their all. As much work as they would any other of their projects. But with Snow Day, we didn't really get that. There was the occasional promotional video on the South Park YouTube channel where Trey looked as if he were on a completely different planet. And for the IGN preview, he was somewhere else altogether. I'm not trying to get conspiratorial and say that they just weren't all that invested in this project, but at the same time, it's undeniable that the hype around this game was next to non-existent. Now it's out and, well, people don't like it, to put it simple. I honestly wasn't gonna get this game. I didn't get sent no dang free code and they didn't really give me any reason to think it was worth checking out. But then I got bored at 2 AM and thought, fuck it. And so now here I am. Is that really what the start screen looks like? Anyways, I suppose with that, it's time to delve into South Park Snow Day to see if it's a passionate is it a disastrous is it good or bad? One thing I appreciate about the opening here is that they bothered getting South Park Studios to actually animate it in-house. Really, for the duration of this quite lengthy opener, you could completely treat it like another episode of the show, where we see a massive blizzard head towards town, with Cartman praying to God to please let the town get covered in the most snow it's ever had, just so he doesn't have to go to school. It's an incredibly endearing idea for a South Park game on the surface. Matt and Trey always wanted to invoke a similar feeling to Earthbound with these, where you would play as a blank kid traversing this town by yourself, things seeming so much grander than they actually are in reality. And this concept lends itself perfectly towards that. With all the parents snowed in and unable to go anywhere, it makes the entire town the kids' playground, able to do whatever they want with little to no interference. I'm not really into them going right back to the wizard stuff with no explanation. Fractured But Whole set a nice precedent where you would assume each new game would tackle a different genre from the last, but I have to assume they just went with this for marketing reasons, which is a little sad. Everyone's designs are simply one-to-one copied from the Stick of Truth, kinda aided in the feeling that this game didn't know what it wanted to do to stand apart. I'm also not too clear on why they thought doing a COVID parody would be the way to go for their brand new game. From the way everyone in-universe talks about the snowstorm, it's pretty evident this is meant to be a take on COVID, you know, which they already did. But now everyone is stuck in their houses and toilet paper has become the new form of currency. Biting. But really all of that is kind of irrelevant. Again, it's just an excuse to have all the kids in town playing with each other again after the new kid ruined the previous two by getting way too OP. Yeah, despite the change in genre and, well, dimension, Snow Day is still following the events of the RPGs. You're once again put right back at square one with everybody being incredibly pissed off at you. And so now it's time to join the Grand Wizard Cartman's faction. Again. As Clyde has informed Eric that the Elven army led by Kyle is planning an attack on their kingdom. They're not really after anything this time, but and with that, we're dropped into a short tutorial. And by short, of course, I mean 15 minutes long. I guess it's to teach us how to deal with this newfangled dimension. I like the idea for it, though. You go on a short journey to the school where you have to walk through the destroyed building, Mr. Mackey locked inside and the game slowly telling you more and more about what you can do in this new adventure. I'm a little sad that you don't get to explore it all here, but whatever, I get it's something new, more linear. Overall, the tutorial is a decent time, but I think it really has the potential to make people have a super negative first impression.
Hey, what the fuck? Return fire! Return fire!
What? Who is that? That can't be Matt or Trey. It sounds like someone doing a bad Eric Cartman impression. I think this literally might just be one of the developers inserting their own impression. Okay. There's something I'm gonna talk about way more later, but this is definitely one of those games where you start incredibly underpowered. Painfully so. And so having to control the new kid with only 2 measly weak weapons with little to no difference in how you approach each fight kind of shows how quickly it takes for this game to become repetitive. It's not a good sign when I start getting bored of the main cycle during the tutorial. But on the more positive side, your character control's alright. Seeing how they run in 3D will never not be jarring, but turning, jumping, all feels fine. Except for running. Running fucking sucks. I think I was late to realizing this game was most likely intended to be played with a keyboard and mouse. But it does this annoying ass thing where your character's walking speed is incredibly slow, with you having a run button and stamina meter. Really like that you have infinite stamina when not in battle too, that's a great feature. However, you can only run while pressing directly in front of you, meaning if you want to run to the left or right to dodge shit, you're fucked. You're gonna go right back to walking. Again, this wouldn't be a big deal playing with a keyboard and mouse since you can more easily move the camera while multitasking, but on a controller, where the run is attached to the circle button, it makes it really obnoxious to have to use one finger to hold that down while using your thumb to move the camera. Always disrupted me, fucking pissed me off. But whatever, controls still are fine for the most part. Combat feels alright even if the bow takes forever to use and does little to no damage, but things seem to be at the very least decent so far. And with that, we're dropped into the hub world. You can customize your new kid here, although there's not much variety when you start. I went with Fantasia at Mickey Mouse. You can also choose your weapons with Tolkien. Again, one option. But what you're supposed to do here is talk to Eric, who will give you a list of 5 missions to conquer. And upon choosing, you walk to this little snow burrow, which will load you in. This is not what I did, though. I ran around this hub world for ages seeing what I could find. Answers nothing. For some reason, they let you walk around this giant-ass hub world outside of Cartman's backyard. And while it's nowhere near on the level of what the others had to offer, I still appreciate having the ability to walk around Eric's street. If there were something to actually find. I understand that, of course, we're not going to have the amount of freedom that's expected from an RPG, but at the same time, it's South Park in 3D. Of course I'd want to run around this place. They've had a long, almost 30-year history to pull from. It was cool getting to explore the kids' bedrooms and see all the props they've accumulated over the past 25 seasons, listening to the different tracks Trez produced on the radio. Again, it's something very pedantic to get over, but sadly, this only comes from the two of them having set the bar so high. So when it's not here, it ends up feeling as if something is missing. From everything I've seen thus far, it appears that the best phrase I can use to describe their writing and set up a snow day is South Park on autopilot. There's no real effort here to break new ground. Not that it needs to, but if their goal here is to do something at a much smaller scope, then the last thing I would want to do is make any references to their previous material that actually tried to do something groundbreaking. And succeeded, mind you. I know I'm complaining a lot, which doesn't seem fair considering I haven't even, started level 1 and stuff. But I really think I was mostly disappointed to see that Snow Day just kinda starts. Throws you in with little to no fanfare or spectacle apart from that janky but admittedly neat transition from 2D to 3D. I don't know, Stick of Truth and Fractured Butthole just had incredibly strong openings in my opinion, so this one starting out with a drawn out baby tutorial and not even being all that funny to make up for it, seems like a sign of things to come. Alright, level 1 end. Okay, I've avoided the white elephant in the room for long enough. Don't know what I'm talking about? Well, I want to show you something. Here is what the tutorial of Snow Day looks like. Here's the hub world we just saw. Now here's level 1. Notice anything? I get it's called Snow Day and all, but this really seems like an idea that was better in concept than execution because all these fucking places look the same. Wanna know how I know this? Every stage I just showed you, completely random. This is level 1, this is the tutorial, and this is the hub world. Fantastic. And as we'll get into later, this game is being sold with a season pass, with the promise of future DLC stuff down the line. So it sucks to know that they're all gonna have to adhere to this Snow Day gimmick, when it would be way cooler to actually visit more places from the show, or at least a couple areas that aren't just completely white. You were almost never inside buildings in Snow Day. It is primarily an outdoor adventure, and so after a while your mind grows bored of looking at the same theme over and over again with little to nothing breaking up the monotony of a screen that's 95% just fucking white. South Park has snow, I get that, but it's never been on this level. Everywhere blends together and I'm so baffled as to how nobody in the team noticed this before making it the primary focus of the game. The N64 South Park game has better art direction than this, I'd argue. Anyway, so, to get back on our mission, we gotta find Kyle to put a stop to whatever plan he's enacting on Eric, and so... Oh, there, he is right there, cool. Here's where I gotta give Snow Day some props. I actually really do like the main idea behind each stage, and it's that at the start of every round, the leaders of both forces meet to explain which perks their armies will have during the level. You get 2 each time, but the enemy can get in upwards of 5 at a time, perfect. This can go from them equipping all the foes with deadly bows and arrows, laser swords, reviving some fallen enemies, turning them into vampires, and sadly what you get isn't anywhere near as cool. Oh boy, I can be like 5% bigger, making it harder to evade attacks, or shoot lasers out of my eyes that are next to pointless when fighting on terrain that isn't completely flat. But I appreciate the idea, I guess. With a game as visually and, as we're gonna soon see, mechanically repetitive as Snow Day, this card system does a pretty good job at making each run feel a little varied. You can even see in the hub world with Butters that there's a bunch of rule cards in here. I feel like I only saw the same 5 or 6 throughout my time with it, but I'm sure they're neat. What further builds upon this is the Jimmy and Henrietta pit stops you can get to throughout each stage. They're everywhere, only able to be interacted with after wiping out each horde of enemies, which makes it really infuriating when the area is massive and some random kid is hiding around somewhere, AI most likely busted and unaware of where to go, and so now you need to run all around the place looking for him. Or just pray they eventually despawn. I have no idea why that would keep happening. Anyways, with Jimmy you can equip one of 3 cards, each of them giving you a different permanent perk, such as adding a grind point to your fart move, which I find useful. Even better when you stack them and get a card that allows your farts to suck enemies right below you, setting them up perfectly to be crushed. There's a different set of perks depending on which weapons and power-ups you choose to go into battle with. There's unfortunately only a grand total of 3 melee and 3 long-range weapons, but they all feel pretty different even if I wish there were more. Guess I gotta wait for the Season Pass update. Boy, video games sure are fun, but the sheer amount of upgrades you can obtain for each weapon, again, helps with giving it some variety. And you can even use your toilet paper to make the card a higher rarity, increasing whatever the effect is for a bit. For example, I can get a card that adds a Tesla coil effect onto my fire wand, making it incredibly overpowered, or increase the range of my health totem. You can equip a lot more powers with token after unlocking them, but unfortunately I thought that the 2 default options, health and the fire escape, were more than useful enough for me to justify not trying any of the others out. Maybe if I didn't unlock them so far in that I was already used to what I had and didn't want to risk switching them out for reasons I will get into later. On the opposite end, Henrietta's tarot cards are usually used for getting you ready for the next phase of the battle, like replenishing your bullshit card uses or getting more toilet paper for your next Jimmy encounter. This is the best aspect of the game in my opinion, and something that I wish I could see all of. But again, only 5 stages, so fuck me, I guess. Something I'm really beginning to notice as I play through the first stage, however, is that the enemy variety fucking sucks. Just to see them kids copy and paste it all over the place, which would be a little more excusable if they recorded more than 5 lines of dialogue for him. Don't get me wrong, it was a sweet idea for Matt and Trey to let their kids voice the enemies in Snow Day. Trey uses his daughter so often in the Mean Show that I could recognize her voice anywhere, but by God, it gets old. If it were just for a couple enemies, or hell, even just stuck to one enemy type, then I'd be fine with it, who cares? But they are everywhere, oftentimes repeating the same lines over each other constantly. It doesn't help in each battle feeling incredibly repetitive, which is definitely not further helped by the combat. You can do all of 3 things in Snow Day: a basic combo, your long-ranged weapon of choice, and a jumping attack. That's all you're going to be doing here throughout each and every level. With Stage 1, it seems like they're trying to make the variety come from your objective. Like this part where you find Roundy trapped underneath Stark's pond, needing to find gas and the keys for a truck to help him escape. But it's just a glorified fetch quest. The game may as well be sending you on a linear path because getting these items equates to nothing more than just wiping out every enemy in an area and taking it off whoever's back it was attached to. And it's not like you have the freedom to just rush in, steal the item, and run out of there. You know, it being your choice whether or not you want to kill all the enemies and be rewarded with a card from Jimmy at the end. No. Because despite Cartman constantly telling you to stop what you're doing and grab the item,
pick up that loot and let's get back to fighting the elves.
I'm working on it! But once you have the thing, a new mission pops up at the top of the screen informing you that you still have to defeat everyone, meaning I now have to make my way all the way back to the start of the area and fight through everyone again, which I didn't do on the way because I wanted Cartman to stop fucking yelling at me. Not having a good time, gonna be real. Got that right. This wouldn't be a huge deal or anything, but these levels drag out for ages. Just the same waves of enemies over and over again for what feels like an eternity. It never feels as if there's any progression for so long because you're just fighting endless waves of the same bad guys in the same fucking locations. I'm only on the first level yet it feels like it's been going on for an hour with no end in sight. I make long levels if you want, whatever, as long as it's fun. But if you know your stage is this fucking long, then the one thing that you definitely wouldn't want to do to evoke fatigue in your player is to convey to them how long they've been doing this for by having the music end. You sit in silence for a bit, and then the song starts from the beginning again. That is inexcusable. This is some Crash the Wrath of Cortex shit right there. And God, the sound design is a fucking whole other issue. Not only does it have that glorious repeating music, but we've also got some truly terrible sound effects in here, like the fucking Minecraft walking sound while traveling on ice. But on top of all that, for almost every single cutscene here, the audio is completely out of sync.
They're my secret army. We're attacking you before you attack us.
What are you talking about?
My spies saw your army gearing up for battle.
Your spies? What the fuck are you talking
Yeah,
about?
your spies, Kyle. They're your spies are getting ready for battle.
This is a constant throughout most of the game, not to mention the terrible mixing. I don't know if it's because they recorded last-minute lines at home or something, but sometimes the characters sound like they're talking through a fucking tin can. Was this a rush job? Why did it come out like this? You'd at least think with the little amount of content present here, it would at the very least be polished. And I can't believe I failed to mention this at all so far, but you're not alone in this adventure. No! Instead, there is mandatory co-op, with the requirement of you having 3 players with you during your run. I never bothered trying out the matchmaking since I don't want that to affect my impressions or anything, and God knows I don't have 3 friends willing to drop $30 on this shit, or 3 friends. But thankfully, if you don't have real people to play with you, the game will automatically assign you 3 AI characters, and boy, they sure don't help at all. They more often than not just stand around and do a couple attacks maybe. Then they die. Now I have to stop what I'm doing because Cartman won't stop chastising me by not reviving my teammate, and find a way over to them for an epic Fortnite revive. All while avoiding the enemies because God knows if I perish, these fuckers aren't gonna be jumping in front of no bullets for me. Too busy staring at the fucking sun doing a whole lot of nothing. Whatever, it at least appears that I'm approaching the end of the stage. Fucking finally, it's only taken an hour. Where you get ambushed under Stark's Pond by the elves. And God, does it suddenly make sense why they chose to rarely lock you inside enclosed areas? Because, well, look at this! It's a visual mess not helped by every single character bleeding together. At least in an RPG, most of the kids being used from the CMBS didn't affect anything since it was clear where everything was. You're here, enemy here, go. But here it's just a bunch of bobbleheads whacking together. I can't tell what's going on or if I'm winning or not, especially because my stats just fucking disappeared, thank you! Oh God, fuck no, not now. My controller just fucking disconnected because my fucking dog stood on my remote while it was plugged in and busted the cords and it just switches off randomly. Thanks, dog. Fuck, I died. Oh my god, shit, please, please. My AI companion, if there were any time for you to function, it would be now, please, I am begging you. What the fuck? Okay, no big deal. I guess. I'll just respawn at the last checkpoint and...
Don't let your ass get kicked by the fucking elves again, man. I have a reputation to protect.
I have to do the whole thing over again? There are no checkpoints in these hour-long stages? Of course, why would there be? I think I'm going to bed. And that was my first experience with South Park Snow Day. Didn't leave a stellar first impression. Originally, I was planning on powering through all this in one sitting, but I think they've made it clear that that is not the way to go unless I want to end up putting my fucking head through a wall. This is why I never wanted to experiment with weapons or power-ups, because I know that if I pick a bad combo without knowing, I would potentially have to replay hours worth of gameplay. And as I lay awake there trying to comprehend what the fuck I just played, one thought couldn't leave my head. What happened here? I talked about it earlier, but Matt and Tress seem to have such confidence behind their previous gaming projects, even during their Comic-Con panel where they could not seem more downtrodden. Trey claiming to perpetually be in the state he's in right before a new episode releases where he worries it's the worst thing he's ever made. But it's clear that it came from a place of care. He wanted it to be good and for his efforts to pay off so badly that the thought of folks not liking it made him miserable. But here? I don't know, I just don't see it. I remember first hearing about this game when Matt and Tress signed on for that $900 million deal with Paramount to start making the specials for them for the next 7 years. I think this video game was a part of that contract. And honestly, it makes total sense why there seems to be such a lack of passion behind this project if that's the case. Stick of Truth came from their desire to redeem their reputation in the video game market and make something they would have wanted to play. Fractured But Whole came from their attempt to take criticism from the Stick of Truth into account, wanting to top themselves. Whereas Snow Dash seems to have come from signing a contract saying they would. The brunt of the work here seems to be on THQ Nordic's end, with Matt and Trey checking in every now and then to give input. Not being able to dedicate all their time to it because not only are they busy having to make a season of South Park each year, but also 2 hour-long specials, and they just got done opening their new restaurant, which seems to have taken up most of their focus over the past couple years. Now, THQ Nordic are a talented studio, sure. I'm incredibly excited for their upcoming Epic Mickey remake, but at the same time, I think the overall plan for Snow Dash seems way more ambitious than anything they've attempted before. See, South Park Snow Dash is not just your regular game. It's this terrible little thing known as a live service game. This is the last thing I would have expected from them, considering Tress seemed very adamant during the Stick of Truth's release date that DLC was lame and that they didn't want to do it.
And everyone kept saying that word to us, that phrase to us, not praise, those letters to us, DLC. And they're like, oh, just make a DLC. I agree, fuck that.
There's a few ideas along the way that we've kind of peeled off and said, okay, we're gonna make that like DLC.
Fresh but Whole had a couple pieces, but at the very least it was an entirely new story. It felt like a worthy add-on. But here, not so much. Live service is basically just DLC, but it's sprinkled out to you over the course of however many months, with the payment being made up front, of course. Buy the content first, then decide if it was worth your money. And the best part is, because it's part of an existing game, no refunds. Better play it anyway to get your money's worth. This has since become the trend for games, where you release a product with an intentionally small amount of content to bring players in, and then have them purchase a season pass to obtain new content whenever they're done with it. The only problem is, when you make your game like this, you need to make sure it's good enough for people to be willing to shell out more money for more content, whether it be weapons, cosmetic items, or what Snowdead desperately needs more of, levels. With how many games are doing this now, I just can't see South Park Snowdead doing enough new to warrant a majority of gamers adding yet another subscription to their ever-growing list. And with no players buying the season pass, there's less money to put into the game. And less money means less content, and less content leaves you with a husk of something that could have been a lot cooler if they just put more time into it. Enough time to warrant buying it for a full $60. Because while $30 is a good price for a regular game these days, it feels to consider most of these live service games are free, with all the money coming in from the season passes. But with South Park, after buying the season pass, you've now almost spent as much as you would have on an actual AAA release, all for the promise of getting more content later down the line. And with the way things are looking now, all we have by the end of 2024 is more costumes, 2 new weapons, and a new game mode, which presumably won't have a story like the main campaign. So what motivation is for me to keep playing? To rise the leaderboards or do battle with my friends? Well, newsflash, the game has been out for a week now, and the player base hasn't managed to crack an all-time peak of not even 4,000 players. That sounds like a lot in theory, but remember, I have to imagine maybe like 5% of these people are going to be invested enough to buy the season pass. What's going to happen a month after the game is released? Or 6 months? Or a year? With a seemingly minimal amount of content being added over the course of the year, I can't imagine it's going to bring in many new players. And it's only a matter of time before the current player base gets bored of replaying the same 5 levels or basic fights against a couple of waves of enemies that they're already fighting in the story mode. Okay, well, whatever. The past is in the past, it's a new day, and I'm going to try to go into this again with an open mind. You know, what's funny is, I didn't even notice there was a whole other side to the hub world here when I first played it, with Craig and Tweak's Bazaar for alternate outfits, and oh shit, Mr. Hanky! Feel like it's been forever since we've seen him. He lets you use these dark matter jars you find throughout the levels to upgrade your skill tree, increasing your damage, health, stamina. You know, that's a little interesting, I guess. These slightly higher stats seem to be just what I needed to get through the first level. Honestly, it was no fucking sweat this time, especially after swapping out that dinky-ass bow for a fire attack. I also learned that if you use your fart escape and then shoot the cloud with your fire, it ignites and damages all the enemies in its radius. You know, that's neat. I wish there were more elemental stuff like this, where I can actually think about what would be best for me in the moment. Not to mention, it's, fun and, cool. I did manage to get to the boss fight with Kyle this time, which ended up being the most fun I've ever had so far in this whole thing. I don't like that he has the power to teleport all over the bloody place at will, but the mechanics in Snowdeath seem much more intuitive and enjoyable when I'm aimed at a single foe with a set amount of patterns I can learn and figure out what would be best for me in the moment. Also, the first time in the game that I actually laughed. That's something.
Fuck you, Cartman.
I think maybe the reason why folks are criticizing this game's comedy is sadly, once again, because of the RPGs. Obviously, those things are going to be jam-packed with cutscenes and dialogue and jokes, meaning there's more opportunity to make you laugh. You know, they could shoot out 20 jokes to you in a minute, and at least one was bound to be funny. Compared to Snowdeath, which cutscene amount peels in comparison. So of course there's going to be less opportunity to make you laugh, and when a joke fails to land, you gotta sit on it for like an hour till the next cutscene arrives. After beating Kyle, we're informed that he actually didn't plan any attack on Cartman, and that Stan is the one behind this endless winter, apparently having gone mad. And so now with Kyle on our side, it's off to see what's up with him. From here, each level, despite not breaking out of the snow theming, at least makes an effort to explore a different area in town. We visit the rooftops of Main Street, Hell's Pass Hospital, the ruins of Soda Sopa. Shit, I wish there were more of that near the beginning. Level 3 and 5 in particular I think are real highlights because there's a way more clear goal in mind, both of which have you scaling to the top of buildings. Makes it feel like you've actually progressed the further you get up and see how far the drop below is. It's not a vast improvement or anything, you're still just whacking the same crowds of enemies for the most part, but there's a lot of little things that I'm starting to notice about this that I kinda like. My throat's fucking dying. Like realizing all the characters are gonna have their own unique factions with different designs representing the character. Well, except for Kenny. As we soon see Stan deploy her to defeat you. Stan moving on to the next level as Kenny now represents the flag stolen in Mission 2. Little Liam, but whatever, it was still fun. Again, the one-on-one fights are my favorite part of Snow Day by a long shot. Something worth commenting on is how I think as the game goes on, the graphics and designs of these locations are given much more opportunity to impress. I think these levels look best when there's a bunch of colored lights surrounding you in the night. It contrasts nicely against the snow and it almost makes certain levels stand apart from others. Almost. Really, my biggest issue at this point in how Snowdale looks would have to be the character models themselves. When translating the characters to 3D, you're going to end up losing a lot of that charm. If anything, this game just ends up looking like a fully realized version of that old South Park Xbox game that got cancelled. They can't stand at 3/4 angles, and so you're always staring at their slapped-on sticker face, with their eyes wrapping around their heads, along with their silhouettes being seriously hindered. Like, look at Kyle's trapper hat. I just learned it had a name. It doesn't stick out nearly enough. He looks way too boxy, along with Butter's hair having to fall flat in his head instead of sticking out. Reminds me of these Liam BB toys I had as a kid. It's the best they could do, and it's clear that with South Park Studios being enlisted to animate every single cutscene so the 3D animators could use it as a reference, you know, there was a lot of effort in here to make it faithful to the show, but it just didn't work out too well in my opinion. Not bad, but not good. I wonder if in the future they could try and emulate a Mickey Mouse ear effect when appropriate, giving features like Butter's hairdo or Stan's puffball the ability to follow the camera, making sure it's always front-facing. Who knows how that would look in practice, though I ain't no fucking 3D modeler. Or hell, just make the game look like the newest intro to the show they've been using for like a decade now. It looks fantastic, and I'm sure folks would love a playable version of that. It would look fantastic. But I understand that probably would entail yet again changing the genre, but I wouldn't be shedding a tear over it. Well, anyways, after defeating Stan, we learn that he's been put under what's essentially mind control, filling him with rage. And just what's been doing all this? Or who?
Ever since I got that dark matter stuff from Mr. Hanky, I just felt like different and...
What did you say?
I got this dark matter stuff from my axe, and I just felt so powerful that I thought I could...
From Mr. Hanky? The Christmas Poo?
Yeah.
Don't you guys remember? Mr. Hanky was kicked out of town. By the entire town. Everyone turned on him.
Wait, what the fuck? Oh, that's right, I completely forgot that Mr. Hanky got kicked out of the show like 6 years ago. Finally, we're getting a follow-up to that random episode for some reason. 6 years later. Honestly, this perked me right back up. The game's story finally showing a spark of life, with the boys realizing that Mr. Hanky has returned for revenge on the town, poisoning everyone with his dark shit, it's shit, right? It's gonna be shit. Cartman even briefly betrays the group to join forces with Mr. Hanky, never wanting to return to school, which made for a fun double twist. That stage kind of fucking sucks though. All the enemies by this point are getting really strong, with poisoned adults now joining among the fighting children. But I mainly hate it because once again, they fucking act as if you can skip past all the enemies when you're still expected to beat them all. When we find Eric, the mission thing tells you to catch Cartman, and this fucker can run. And so I'm chasing him all the way to the end of the area. He gets away because it's an automated sequence, and that tells you that you can't progress until you defeat all the enemies. But you told me to catch Cartman. Whatever, the Bullrog fight at the end was really cool, even if that's not Bullrog, but whatever. Honestly, if they wanted to make this game bigger and, honestly, better, why couldn't it just have been a single-player adventure with each main kid in town getting their own level with them as the final boss? Each kid has separated into their own army, and the only way to bring them to yours as the new kid is to kick their ass. Not just the main 4 boys either, Craig, Tweak, Jimmy, Tolkien, I don't know, Timmy even. The more you play, the more you wind up building your own clan of South Park kids, with you being able to swap out 3 at a time, kinda like Freshed but Whole, each kid having different skills and attributes. Basically, what I'm saying is, South Park Kingdom Hearts. Admittedly, the combat does get better as you go on though, once you begin getting more Jimmy card options for your new weapons. It's really easy to get overpowered in a level if your luck is right. But thankfully it's balanced enough to where you getting a bad selection doesn't automatically mean you won't have a chance. And the more I go on and the more I start to get a handle of this cycle they're going for, the more I'm finding myself actually starting to enjoy this. Unfortunately, however, the Mr. Hanky boss fight at the end was a bit of a letdown. The design is cool and I like that the goal is to get toilet paper off the little ones and shoot it at them from cannons, but it goes by way too quick and ends super anticlimactically. Either way, with that, the game is over. Even ends by giving a conclusion to that Mr. Hanky stuff, with Jesus kinda just showing up to express disappointment for them for not being more willing to forgive Mr. Hanky for all those problematic tweets that he made. And with that, they apologize and everyone is friends again, huzzah. Mr. Hanky now willing to make it a snow day whenever the boys want, which I find to be a fun way of letting the game have a definitive ending while giving an in-universe reason for why it continues to snow. I'm losing my voice from all that screaming earlier. Saying that though, there's nothing really to do now. You're informed there's this Nicole thing, random character, where you can find her in levels and get to do something. It claims it will make things super hard, but I'm not sure if that's the entire level or just certain parts. I don't really feel like finding out, and I've not seen a single YouTube video showing it off, so I guess that's it, right? For now, at least. I can't say I'm surprised how short it was, again, given the price tag, but 5 levels? I can't get past that. Snow Day feels as if it's ending right when it's starting to begin. It feels as if there's so much untapped potential here, especially given how much enjoyment I got out of the last couple levels. I really think Snow Day is at its best when it's leaning into what little variety it can offer. Like Stage 3 giving you specific missions like lighting yourself on fire while lighting these beacons up the tower, or again 5 having you travel up the hospital. Snow Day works when it's disguising the fact that you're basically just mashing the same 2 button combos for 5 hours. But unfortunately, I don't think it reaches that potential very often. I wish this game could have been made in a day where live service stuff wasn't the trend. Hell, I think if this was released on the PS2 in the 2000s, it would have been one of those games that tries to shove in as many different styles as it can. Driving, combat, shooting, collectathon, all of which would be equal amounts of mediocre. But in this day and age, in 2024, games just don't seem to be that simple anymore. Now you have to buy season passes to truly get your money's worth. And if not, then try to get some enjoyment out of the same 5 levels over and over. Have at it. I just can't see this game being very successful enough to make more story content. I haven't seen a single soul talking about this game unless it's to say how bad it is. The only audience here is existing South Park fans, whereas I'd argue anybody could love The Stick of Truth or Fractured But Whole, simply because they're good games. But at the very least, I hope this doesn't deter Matt and Trev from trying their hand at another video game in the future. If anything, I hope this gives them the motivation to want to improve upon what didn't work about this one. But can you realistically start development on another project while expecting folks to continue spending money on the last one? Or do you just call it quits and move past it while pissing off the people who did bother spending the season pass money on Snow Day? They've put all their eggs in one basket, and with how busy the duo seem to be, along with frankly just being a lot older now, you know, The Stick of Truth is 10 years old, I'm really uncertain what the future for South Park games hold. But at the very least, I pray that this isn't what they go out on. Despite having a good bit of fun with the latter half of Snow Day, I definitely wouldn't recommend it to anyone. The only people who would want to play this thing have already bought it realistically. There's just not enough here to warrant the price, along with there being just much better things to play right now. And so with that, that's it.